Mena-Watch, der unabhängige Nahost-Think Tank.
My name is Jasmin Arémi, editor at Mena-Watch, and today we have as our guest Mohammad Abdullahpour from the Democratic Party of Kurdistan-Iran in Austria, also known as the PDKI. And that's exactly what we want to discuss with him today. Mr. Abdullahpour, it's wonderful to have you here, and we truly appreciate you taking the time. You are representing the Democratic Party of Kurdistan-Iran here in Austria. How did you become politically active, and why did you decide to join the PDKI?
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. And yes, I actually grew up in a region where political oppression, cultural discrimination, and structural violence, unfortunately, were very much a part of our daily lives, a common everyday occurrence that we had to endure. For many people in Kurdistan, politics isn't just a theory, but rather a vital, a very essential survival strategy. For me, the Democratic Party of Kurdistan-Iran genuinely represented the force that credibly champions democracy, human rights, and the dignity of all ethnic and religious groups throughout Iran, which is truly remarkable. And this party, for 80 years, or rather for 8 whole decades, has consistently and resolutely championed the national rights of the Kurds and tirelessly advocated for a democratic and inclusive system for all of Iran. And out of sheer unyielding conviction, I naturally made the conscious decision to join this party.
That's certainly very interesting, especially considering the background of the executions and repressions in Iran that we have recently been forced to witness. Perhaps to give our listeners a quick but comprehensive overview, what are the central objectives that the PDKI is pursuing today, especially with an eye on a federal and democratic Iran?
Yes, we, as the Democratic Party of Kurdistan-Iran, are committed to establishing a truly federal, secular and democratic Iran, a vision that we wholeheartedly strive to achieve, where all nations, naturally, but also religious communities, ethnic and religious minorities, and especially the equality of women, are highly upheld and championed, of course. It's about ensuring these foundational principles are not just valued, but actively advanced. Or rather, they should and must be protected. The crucial difference compared to centralized natural models that existed previously.
How does this model differ from previous centralized state designs?
Yes, the decisive difference to the earlier centralized models is that power is no longer concentrated in one specific point within Iran, which until now has always been Tehran, and it's no longer solely concentrated in the hands of a single person. For example, in the hands of a single leader, like Ayatollah Khamenei is currently, or in those of future monarchs, such as the current Prince Reza Pahlavi, who is also actively seeking to gain power. Instead, political power should be regionally, federally, and democratically legitimized and controlled, so that all the people who actually reside in Iran, who live within the geography of Iran, receive real opportunities for participation. This means self-governance, or the comprehensive safeguarding of all human rights that are enshrined within the United Nations Human Rights Charter. There should be a just and equitable participation in resources, along with a constitution that doesn't just tolerate diversity, but actively works to protect it. We strongly believe that diversity is an opportunity and certainly not a threat. Regrettably, diversity has consistently been seen as a threat by both the Pahlavi dynasty and the current Islamic regime, without any exception. And regrettably, even the current son of the former Shah, despite having lived in exile within democratic structures for almost 47 years, has unfortunately drawn no lessons from this experience for a pluralistic, federalist, and truly democratic Iran. It's a significant missed opportunity, considering his extensive time in environments fostering such vital principles. And that is precisely what makes all the difference. This implies that we, as proponents of democracy, no longer require such a centralized power structure within Iran. We firmly believe that oppression inevitably arises when power is concentrated in a single point, especially within a diverse, multi-ethnic state like Iran.
What exactly does your work as the PDKI representative in Austria look like? And also with consideration to the background of exiled Iranians living in Austria and perhaps also in Germany, but equally to the people in Iran who are currently directly affected.
As a representative of the Democratic Party of Kurdistan-Iran myself, I actually represent the party here in Austria, particularly within the political landscape, and I do so quite actively at the regional, state, federal, and even European Union level. I maintain very strong contacts, of course, with various members of the National Parliament, the Vienna State Parliament, members of the European Parliament, political party representatives, but also other organizations, diverse communities, NGOs, essentially all those who can genuinely provide any kind of meaningful impact or vital support for the people in Kurdistan and Iran. We also maintain very close contact with the Iranian community, specifically with those who firmly believe in and actively support the multi-ethnic statehood of Iran, embracing its diverse character and inherent strength. Thus, this principle is of great importance to us. We stand for democracy, for human rights, for coexistence, and if any group denies that or ignores the multi-ethnic state that Iran truly is, then we believe that such a group is not genuinely interested in democracy or in finding any real solution for Iran.
How would you describe the current situation of the Kurds in Iran, both politically and in terms of security?
It is truly not a pleasant situation. The situation of the Kurds was not at all pleasant from the very beginning, especially under both regimes, that is to say under the Shah, but also under the current regime that exists today, the Islamic regime. The situation for the Kurds in Iran remains extremely critical and indeed quite perilous, I would venture to say. The Kurdish regions, unfortunately, are consistently viewed and managed by the regime as designated security zones. This, of course, results in a state of permanent militarization, widespread arbitrary arrests, and a brutal policy of repression that all too frequently culminates in fatalities. Politically speaking, any and all forms of civic or community engagement within the Kurdish territories are quite naturally being criminalized. Even cultural activities are unfortunately depicted as a significant threat by the current regime. And all of this culminates in the regime's killing machine constantly operating of the regime, that it is constantly in operation in the Kurdish regions. Because this combination of political oppression and strict security policies truly creates a highly explosive and dangerous situation. The security forces are heavily armed and follow a state-controlled doctrine that allows for no space at all, a doctrine that allows absolutely no room for any kind of dialogue, discussion, or even de-escalation. And what's particularly horrifying, truly distressing, is that even peaceful demonstrators, including young people and children, some merely under 15 or exactly 15 years old, are consistently targeted during these protests and are in fact systematically killed in the Kurdish territories. This reveals a really fundamental structural problem. Portions of the security forces are, of course, systematically conditioned to prioritize obedience above fundamental human values. And this systematic dehumanization, if I may put it that way, has unfortunately led to violence against civilians becoming a commonplace and routine occurrence throughout Iran. We witnessed it, of course, during the last demonstration where they brutally murdered tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people within a mere 2-day span. They attacked women, children, teenagers, and anyone and everyone else who happened to be out on the streets. And these people, they were completely unarmed. Not in the Kurdish areas nor in the rest of Iran, but in the Kurdish areas, of course, the situation is much, much worse. Until recently, when people demonstrated in Iran, in major cities like Tehran, Tabriz, and so on, they were typically dispersed using water cannons or at most with tear gas, that was all. People were shot at. But in Kurdish areas, people instantly grab a weapon, immediately seizing a live firearm. And the Kurdish regions are always the first ones to have casualties, as is often the case, unfortunately.
The latest revolutions, or rather, the most recent revolution, I truly wish to refer to it as a revolution, has, unfortunately, been completely suppressed and put down. But unfortunately, the violence in the Kurdish areas is still ongoing. Are there any regions that are currently being hit particularly hard by this?
Yes, Kurdistan as a whole is indeed very severely affected by this. During the last uprising, of course, it unfortunately happened, especially in the regions of Loristan, Ilam, and Kermanshah. These are the 3 federal states that are predominantly Kurdish, but also other parts of what is known as Rojalat. We call it Iranian Kurdistan Rojalat. The repression there is currently particularly massive. In these provinces, the regime systematically responds to any form of protest with military force and overwhelming power. Regrettably, we are mourning a very high number of fatalities there, and many, many more individuals have been severely injured. Thousands of individuals were naturally arbitrarily arrested, and it's often completely unclear where exactly these people are being held captive. Unfortunately, what we can say with great certainty is that many of these individuals are being held in unknown locations, subjected to severe abuse, humiliation, and inhumane conditions, completely deprived of any access to legal counsel. If they are even still alive, we just don't know. This development, of course, vividly illustrates just how dramatic and threatening the current situation is in these particular regions of Kurdistan.
Could you please elaborate on why the regime specifically targets Kurdish minorities and other minority groups? So, where does the regime see the greatest threat?
Yeah. It is in fact quite clear that the Kurdish population within Iran possesses a rich, extensive and deeply ingrained history of democratic resistance, a tradition that has been nurtured over many generations. From their own history, the people in Kurdistan know that freedom, equality and political rights are not handed over on a silver platter. The Kurds have consistently resisted not only the authoritarian rule of the Pahlavi dynasty, but also the oppressive current Islamic regime. That is inherently embedded in the very roots of the Kurdish people, and for nearly every generation coming of age there, that profound history becomes an intrinsic part of their being. This is deeply ingrained within them. And we, the Kurds, were, of course, one of the very first population groups to publicly oppose the new authoritarian order right from its inception in 1979. We unequivocally said no to the Islamic Republic during that referendum back in those days. This implies that the initial Kurds were truly the primary ones, first and foremost. The Kurds were the very people who stood in opposition to this Islamic regime. At that particular time, Ayatollah Khomeini, of course, issued a call for what was termed the Holy War, the Jihad, specifically against the Kurdish population. Back then, during the nascent years of the first Islamic Revolution, literally thousands of children, students, entire families, and political activists were either rounded up and collectively arrested or, indeed, summarily executed by the regime. The infamous revolutionary judge Sadegh Kalkali was specifically dispatched to the Kurdish territories at that time with the sole purpose of enforcing this policy of repression of the Ayatollah's dictates. Indeed, these historical experiences profoundly shape the political consciousness of Kurdish society, influencing it deeply even to this very day. Consequently, many individuals are resolute in advocating for their rights, even when facing immense personal jeopardy and significant risks. However, the regime inherently perceives any form of Kurdish political organization as a fundamental threat to its very authority. Kurdish parties and activists are all too often subjected to defamed or associated with foreign powers in order to undermine their legitimacy and their standing in the community. That's precisely why Kurdish people are actually they are disproportionately affected by extensive surveillance, arrests, and the use of violence. And this also serves as a strong deterrent for the entirety of Iranian society. The regime is fully aware that Kurdistan has consistently been and continues to be a very powerful driving force for nationwide protests for democratic movements and for significant societal transformations. That's precisely why these repressions are so strong throughout Kurdistan within the Kurdish territories.
The uprisings, the most recent uprisings in Iran, were carried by many young people, Generation Z, and so on. How has the view of the Kurds changed among the younger population in Iran? Have people become more supportive, or is it truly the case that everyone is somewhat preoccupied with their own concerns? Because amid all this ongoing repression, they simply don't have the luxury or the capacity to pay attention to the specific needs of minority groups?
Yes, people have actually become more supportive or more aware of what the Kurds are actually fighting for, especially since the Jinjiyan Azadi revolution really took off. This woman life freedom has brought about, developed a fresh nationwide understanding of diversity within Iranian society. Many Iranians at that time recognized how consistently Kurdish people advocate for freedom, equality, and democratic values. Simply that, the slogan Jinjiyan Azadi, actually it originated from the heart of the Kurdish regions and emerged with the tragic killing of the young Kurd, Jina Amini. That really says quite a lot, and of course this naturally garners immense respect from the Kurdish society within Iran. The younger generation in particular genuinely values and appreciates that, and Kurds, rather, equality and democratic ideals are the profound values that the Iranian populace, indeed all Iranian peoples, now recognize the Kurds have relentlessly championed for many years. It has become especially clear to them now, particularly in light of recent events. But simultaneously, for many people in Iran, there's also been the understanding has truly taken root that the repeated accusation that Kurds or other ethnic groups are, so to speak, separatists or would pose a threat to the country's territorial integrity is completely unfounded. Threaten the territorial integrity of the country itself, which primarily served as a political leverage tool. So now it's certainly not used in that manner anymore to make political deals, especially by the dictatorships. And that's precisely what I mean when I refer to the Ayatollah's dictatorships. And also, of course, the present-day power-hungry Pahlavi loyalists, because they too subscribe to a so-called one country, one nation, one language model, which frankly is quite nationalistic in its nature. And this mono-national ideology, a mono-national ideology of one country, one nation, and one language, to justify it is really the wrong approach for Iran. That is something one cannot simply accept. And we believe that even if parts of the Kurdish population were, in the long term, naturally to really discuss to discuss self-determination or even nationhood for themselves, that would by no means signify the partitioning of Iran, nor would it pose any kind of threat to its other territories. Instead, it would actually entail the reunification of a historically fragmented Kurdish settlement. And Kurdistan, of course, is the land belonging to the Kurdish people. Indeed, the right to self-determination stands as an internationally recognized principle, one that is truly inherent to all nations and all peoples, and which naturally aims to overcome existing oppression rather than creating any new conflicts. Therefore, it is absolutely crucial that political solutions are founded upon dialogue, mutual respect, and the principle of equality. These are values that the Kurds have stood for decades, of course, and these principles have naturally permeated into some segments of the Iranian population as well. That's why some individuals are now aligning with the Kurdish population, and this sentiment is even reflected in the latest slogans from the Jiyan Azadi revolution. Some have already stated in the context of the Jiyan Azadi revolution that if Tehran were also a part of Kurdistan, Iran would truly be a democratic and revitalized nation by now, without a doubt.
If I understand you correctly, you don't necessarily view Reza Pahlavi as the singular key to bringing about change. Well, what other possibilities are there right now, currently available? However, the regime is still very much weakened. Several people are saying that it might just be a small step away from truly collapsing. What do you consider to be realistic?
Realistically speaking, what we're looking at is that in Iran, these so-called regimes, that there have been nationalistic or totalitarian regimes for approximately a century now, spanning roughly 100 years. About 100 years ago, Iran was also a very federal territory, wouldn't you agree? Where truly all the various ethnic groups, Kurds, Arabs, Persians, and Balochs traded with one another, interacted with each other, and nurtured this land together. Iran is truly only significant when these peoples are properly recognized and can, of course, also fully identify themselves within this very geographical area of Iran. I can identify, I am a Kurd from Iran. It's possible. Why shouldn't it be? I am also an Austrian in the EU. Why not? Why shouldn't that work? It absolutely does work. Every single person, every single individual essentially requires a sense of identification for themselves. And the Kurds, they are indeed Kurds. They are a distinct nation. They possess their own land, their own distinctive language, their own culture, and a rich history that reaches far beyond the borders of Iran. And why can't they, as Kurds in Kurdistan and Iran, simply live together with others, with the Balochs, with the Persians, with the Azeris, and so on? So naturally, there's always an alternative path beyond these regimes that are now putting themselves forward.
From a Kurdish perspective, what would truly constitute the minimum requirements for a new beginning, or even the essential minimum conditions?
From a Kurdish perspective, the minimum conditions are actually clear and distinct. We absolutely want a federal Iran, free elections, a parliamentary democracy, and naturally a genuine separation of powers. We also demand the full recognition of Iran as a multi-ethnic nation, acknowledging all its diverse peoples as equally sovereign nations within its borders. Furthermore, we seek the recognition of the Kurdish nation, encompassing its language, culture, and regional self-governance, complete gender equality across all aspects of life, naturally, as well as the equal rights of all ethnic and religious communities, and a strict separation between religion and state. These are, in essence, our fundamental demands. Our demands include the immediate abolition of the death penalty, the demilitarization of Kurdish territories, and the establishment of free political parties and media. Furthermore, we seek independent institutions that will stand above all subsequent or emerging governments. Well, in short, a new Iran demands democracy, federalism, and equal rights for everyone, without any exception.
And sadly, those aren't so utopian, one must admit, especially if you live in Germany or Austria.
Yep.
It's not something where you'd say, oh, okay, these are not pipe dreams. I also have another question concerning the relationships regarding the Kurdish question, specifically focusing on the influence of Rojava, Iraqi Kurdistan, and Turkey. Does that currently bear an influence on the Kurdish question, or are these truly separate factions, perhaps even movements, that have absolutely nothing to do with each other?
I wouldn't say that, because the four parts of Kurdistan, or rather the four Kurdish regions, are intrinsically linked, not only politically but also socially, I would argue, in a very close and dynamic interplay. Developments in one region, whether we are talking about repression, democratization, or something else, strengthening autonomy, have an effect on, often of course, directly on the others. A shared history, language, culture, and so-called cross-border families, even and party structures ensure that no political dynamic, of course, truly remains isolated in just one single part of it. Because of that, naturally, every single change inevitably has a significant impact on the other side. Therefore, even with diverse parties and varying structures, there genuinely exists a broad, overarching Kurdish foundational consensus. The cross-party overarching minimum goals, of course, for the entire Kurdish region are extremely important, without a doubt. We can enumerate some of these fundamental consensuses. For instance, protection from state violence, recognition of cultural and linguistic rights, regional self-administration, and political participation. This encompasses self-determination, acknowledging all Kurdish regions and all ethnic groups as fully equal national communities within these territories. The complete and full equality of women is also one of those fundamental principles that all Kurdish parties, across all four parts of Kurdistan, consistently advocate for and always uphold. Or the rule of law, along with democratic institutions and free political parties. This signifies that the regions exert a very profound mutual influence, and notwithstanding their political disparities, a cohesive objective ultimately unites them. That means freedom, equality, and democratic self-determination for all Kurdish people, women and men alike, naturally.
Democratic values? Are there also concrete forms of cooperation between the parties?
Yes, actually, quite strongly. There are even parties that possess sister parties in other areas as well. As the Democratic Party of Kurdistan-Iran, we collaborate quite extensively with all other parties hailing from the Kurdish regions, such as those in Rojava, in northern Iraq, in what are commonly referred to as Bashur and Bakur. But of course, we ourselves also have plenty of political parties and groups in Iran. There is, of course, a profoundly close collaboration, because whenever I host an event here, you will find representatives from virtually every political faction across the Kurdish regions always present.
So, how would you describe the current situation of the Iranian Kurdish community in Austria, both politically and organizationally speaking?
The Iranian Kurdish community in Austria is quite youthful and very vibrant. A Kurdish community in Europe, as it currently stands, is actually not very old at all. It has grown incredibly strong over the past 25 years, and it truly only emerged within the last 10, 30, 40 years in its entirety. The Iranian Kurdish community that I currently observe in Austria is politically remarkably attentive, deeply engaged, and certainly very opinionated, yet simultaneously it's organizationally quite diverse and not unified, I would say. Many individuals wish to actively engage in fostering democracy, upholding human rights, and promoting public awareness. However, What's frequently absent are robust structures, professional networks, and well-developed enduring organizational frameworks. But at the same time, I also see a new generation, one that is absolutely crucial for the future of our community, our people. This generation is still very much in its early stages in the making. This generation isn't really that active in political life yet, but I do see that they're extremely well educated. Having grown up here, they attend university here, obtain degrees, and are incredibly well connected digitally. This is in stark contrast to earlier communities. They are self-assured in their Kurdish identity, of course, and highly motivated politically. And this younger generation brings with them fresh energy, clear values, and a strong desire for a more modern approach to political work and engagement. They demand increased transparency, enhanced democratic participation, and a more professional handling of political issues naturally. This applies both within the community itself and in direct dialogue with Austrian citizens and various Austrian institutions.
Have there been any instances where you, as a political party in Austrian exile, were able to exert significant pressure on the regime in Tehran or influence political matters within the country itself?
The Kurdish community has, of course, also been able to exert pressure on Iran, and it can naturally also to participate, however. The Kurdish community in exile isn't particularly strong or significantly large, you see. It will take some time for the Kurdish community to get to the same point as the Iranian community, of course. But definitely in any case. One can, of course, as an exiled Kurd or as a member of the Kurdish diaspora, the diaspora of Iran or the Kurds from both sides, of course, international campaigns that, of course, are of particular relevance and interest to Iran, especially with regard to the Iranian situation, so to speak, to carry them out, or in this context as well, to directly engage with political figures, establishing direct contact, to get some things done, especially during the Xinjiang revolution. Naturally, the Kurds didn't accomplish this all by themselves. However, with the Iranian diaspora's support, we've certainly achieved several things. For instance, some prisoners have been safeguarded or their situations have drawn significant global interest and awareness. In this particular instance, we even played the role of lifesavers. Because for some individuals who had been condemned to death, the extensive public dissemination of their cases effectively pressured the Islamic regime to abandon those planned executions. The regime was forced to reconsider their initial judgments due to the international outcry. Because that's precisely what makes the Islamic regime quite nervous, particularly when a case becomes publicly known and is widely publicized. At the European level, or even on a global scale, when such matters, of course, come to light and are publicly revealed, it causes quite a stir. And that, of course, makes the Islamic regime somewhat more hesitant to carry out such repressive acts, especially as it brings everything into the light of the public eye.
Is there a specific message you would like to convey to the Austrian and European public at this very moment? Perhaps one particularly addressed to the political sphere?
The freedom of the Kurds. The freedom of all the diverse peoples within Iran and the overarching freedom of Iran as a nation are profoundly intertwined. Their liberation is not just a regional conflict, but rather a significant gain for the entire world, and particularly for Europe. Or rather, I am actually pleading with the European Union, or Europe as a whole, not just the Union, that they take some matters very, very seriously. In the last century, Iran has actually experienced two authoritarian systems. Both of them have actively suppressed the rich diversity within Iranian society. The European public must grasp this crucial point. There is absolutely no possibility of returning to a monarchy, a theocracy, or any form of centralized unitary model. Whoever suppresses diversity is building the next dictatorship in Iran. Anyone who deliberately ignores minorities is destroying the future of Iran. The diverse peoples of Iran have, of course, demonstrated that peaceful coexistence is possible. And of course, hundreds of years ago, it was actually quite truly, in fact, long before these authoritarian regimes, even though they initiated a policy of forced assimilation targeting ethnic minorities approximately a century ago. And they wanted to implement a nationalism where one country, one nation, and one language was standard. And it's been a full 100 years since then, and what we now understand is that it didn't work out any better than it did in the past. It didn't work in Turkey, and it didn't work in Iran. The problem has persisted and is still prevalent. That's precisely why Kurds, Baluchis, Arabs, Azeris, Lurs, Persians, and numerous other ethnic groups have naturally lived in this region for thousands of years, exchanging knowledge, trading with each other, embracing cultural diversity, and always seeing it as a great asset and richness. And this historical reality completely refutes any argument that would attempt to portray diversity as a threat. It truly shows that Iran's strength lies solely in its peoples acting unitedly rather than in opposition to one another. A democratic, federal, and pluralistic Iran would immensely strengthen regional stability, significantly reduce the root causes of displacement, effectively contain extremism, actively foster robust economic partnerships, and undeniably set a very positive example for all other nations in the region. Europe always benefits and prospers wherever democracy, equality, and the rights of minorities flourish. Therefore, the future of Iran can only be established on one fundamental bedrock: the recognition and acceptance of all peoples, all languages, and all their identities. Whoever destroys diversity naturally destroys Iran. Whoever protects it saves Iran. This is my heartfelt plea to Europe. Please support those who genuinely desire democracy and not those who are actively preparing to establish a new oppressive form of authoritarian rule. Support the people, not the ideologies seeking to reinstall the past or bring back old ways and antiquated systems. The freedom of the Iranian people is also a matter of great concern to Europe. Moreover, a free and pluralistic Iran can demonstrate that people who lived together peacefully 100 years ago are indeed capable of collaboratively building a democratic future today, and do so in a way that is stronger, more just, and more humane than ever before.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdullahpour, for this valuable insight and above all for your valuable work. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the notification bell, and share this conversation on social media. Find more analyses, background, and discussions regularly at Mena-Watch. I'm Jasmin Arémi. Until the next MENA Talk.
Mena-Watch, der unabhängige Nahost-Think Tank. Besuchen Sie auch unsere Website. Dort finden Sie täglich neue aktuelle Berichte und ausführliche wissenschaftlich fundierte Hintergrundanalysen zur Geschichte und Gegenwart der MENA-Region.